Well, I'll add my welcome. I'm so glad to be here, and I'm really grateful for you to be taking time from your day to be here too, and keeping your fingers crossed that you'll maybe learn a little bit of new information, or you'll learn information that will help you put what you already knew to a different kind of use to help meet some of our challenges that we're all facing in our urban areas today. So I'm going to go over real quickly, because I usually forget to do that. Nathan has to help me, but making sure everybody got their folders with the handouts on the inside that we'll be covering later, and the little field guide that's yours to take that has a lot of the information that we'll be covering today in a synopsis in English and in Spanish, in case that's helpful for you. The ruler, you'll find out later in the presentation why you have a ruler. And I think that that's it. We're good to go. So again, thank you, and let's see where we go. So all of us, again, no matter where we live, in a small town, medium or large, or huge like San Antonio, we're all facing the same challenges, right? Our more frequent and more severe flooding. I don't know about you guys, but we're looking at starting the next cycle of looking at the Atlas, I guess it's going to be called Atlas 15 data before we even have a chance to digest on the Atlas 14 maps. And it shows, it's predicted that our floodplains will actually be increasing in size with the intensity of the storms. And then, of course, here in Central Texas, especially in Kerrville, a friend up here, we talk a little regularly about the severe drought. And we're all keeping our fingers crossed that it's not a 20-year drought. And then the freezes, who would have known? When I first moved to San Antonio, I could grow citrus, but not so much now, right? Water is probably the most critical natural resource that you're all familiar with this. And we are going to be looking at not only reducing our water uses in landscapings, but making sure that we've got water for people. And with San Antonio and our area being one of the fastest growing in the country, this is a critical issue. We just had a report a week ago that the aquifer was 60 feet below normal. So that's something to keep in mind as we go forward with looking at how do we make do with what water we do receive. And of course, we all are dealing with an increased water and air pollution. And land degradation, we know that there's issues with greenhouse gases, etc. But making sure that we don't just blame vehicles on that or the energy used in buildings, is that it turns out that about a third of the CO2, the extra CO2 in the atmosphere, comes from land degradation. So keeping that in mind, how we can prevent that in the little pieces of properties that we have to manage. We got erosion and sediment accumulation. Oh my God, if I ever have to shovel out another shovel of sediment out of a system, I would really love to never have to do that again. Loss of biodiversity, that's one of those drivers that there's not really an economic dollar sign per se, but we know that biodiversity is tied into the health and the resiliency of life. Loss of recreational activities, that's probably one of my biggest fears, is losing that water quality or even having water, right? So here are the challenges and what can we do about it? How are we going to address it with landscaping? So landscape practices actually have a huge impact. And as we've seen in this drought, maybe more so than we thought in the past. Okay, I have grown up in the horticulture world. Plants are what's supposed to take in the carbon dioxide and produce oxygen for us, right? But it turns out that soils actually have the capacity for storing more CO2 in their structure than all of the above ground vegetation on the planet. And that's something to kind of keep in mind, because I grew up, the trees, especially the rainforest and the trees in our neighborhoods, are crucial for producing that oxygen and sequestering carbon. And they are. They still play a huge role, but the emerging science is really looking more at soils because of their capacities and what they're able to do. So soils, trees, vegetation, they all need to be in a healthy state. They all work together, and the benefits that we're targeting, that we're, especially in our urban areas, reducing that heat island effect, removing the greenhouse gases. We all focus on CO2, but there's a lot more going on up there than just carbon dioxide. Reducing flooding. Or, being here in Flash Flood Alley, that's really a huge one. How can we use our soils to help reduce flooding? Store stormwater for future use and remove pollutants from the air and the water. Do you remember this back from school? It's been a while for me, but the water cycle, how it moves. And I love this photograph. I want you to know I spent a lot of time looking for a photograph that really shows how when it rains, the water will either run off or infiltrate. And what we're going to be focused on is trying to get more of that water to go into the soil so we have less runoff, reducing flooding, greater recharge for rivers, lakes, aquifers, wells, and even soils, less water pollution as that cleaner water slowly refills these surface waters, and more water for plant growth and soil biome. And it's all happening really right here in this circle that we want to make sure that we're percolating, infiltrating, percolating, getting into that groundwater. And where does all that groundwater eventually move to?
Rivers. The river.
Yep, you got it. It goes to the lowest point in your watershed, and that's going to be your creeks and rivers, and sometimes even lakes. But that's where we want to collect it, and by doing so, we'll be able to keep low flows flowing at a higher rate. So how does landscaping practices make this happen? So we've got, that's one of the things we'll be looking at, and so now you know why you've got your ruler, okay? That's it. I can't wait to see you out there with your scissors and your ruler, making sure you're following some of these practices, and that your guys and gals are too. So adopting landscape practices that will allow more water to soak into the ground, and the practices we'll be looking at building a healthy soil, modifying mowing practices, and maybe even installing some best management practices, like stormwater green infrastructure, whether it's a rain garden in a high-profile office building, or if it's a bioswale, infiltration, trench, etc. They all play a role to accomplish our goals. So here's the textbook soil. This is what I learned at A&M. I'm not going to tell you how long ago. It's been a while. Yeah, you've got mineral particles. Those mineral particles, clay, silt, sand, gravel. What does that particle name refer to? It's on the test later. We're not giving any tests. We thought about it though. So it actually just refers mainly to particle size. Clay, smallest particle size, right? And what does clay do? What's its shape?
Flat.
Flat. That's right. They like to stack up on each other, right? I know I used to pray that I would live in a place with sandy soil so I didn't have to jump up and down on my shovel. Okay? Yes. And the next size particle is silt. It's amorphous. It can be in various shapes. And then you got sands, lots of different kinds of sands. And what typically is the shape of a sand particle? typically we consider them to be more roundish, and then you get into the gravels. So you kind of have better percolation, infiltration, percolation with sand easily. It's our clay soils, and most of us have to deal with clay soils that we're really going to be wanting to work with. The other component is the organic matter. Look how small. This is an average soil, 5% organic matter. When we did soil tests across San Antonio, we found them as low as 3% and as high as 8%. I think 8% was the highest organic matter levels that we found. And in between, in there, the soil's going to have some air and water, and this is the ratio we prefer to see. Therefore, our priority is going to be looking at, is focusing on soil organic matter, because that's where it's all happening. And in our soils, even though we've had so much erosion up in the hill country, we know how long does it take to make an inch of new soil? Boy, I love stretching you guys. This is good.
Not very long if you go get a bunch of mulch.
What, sir?
Cover with mulch and you got your inch. I don't know. How long?
So mineral soil, it takes 500 to 1,000 years.
Okay.
And so in our lifetime, what can we do to improve that? And so if we can't make a lot of new soil, we're not going to be hauling it in and dumping it on our sites, especially even over the recharge zone. But what we can do is what soil that we have left is that we can build up the organic matter. And you can increase the depth up to an inch or so with improving your organic matter by fluffing it out. So now this is really the new definition of soil, and how you put all this activity that's happening in that illustration, how do you put that into a definition? That's tough, right? So soil organic matter plays this crucial role as it is what's fueling the life of the soil. And the more life we have, the healthier your soil is. You want a healthy soil with plenty of air pockets. So stormwater can enter and percolate, gases can escape. Because a lot of times we forget, roots have to have oxygen, and they got to get rid of CO2. So you've got to have that gas exchange going on. And of course the microbes do their own thing. And with that soil organic matter, you've got those sponge-like qualities that we're looking at, fluffing it up. And I always, because I'm this age, from the Rolaids acids commercials. Does anybody remember Rolay commercials? Yeah, absorb 300 times its weight in this excess stomach acids. And that's what soil organic matter can do, is just can suck up the water and hold it right there in the profile. So we also can use these healthy soils for removing the pollutants as the water is percolating through the soil and moving towards our low points, our surface waters. That's how you filter free of charge your water and improve your water quality. All right, this is your first note to take down. You ready? It's actually in your field guide, so. But you can impress your family. You can challenge your kids. A 1% increase in soil organic matter, which is not that hard to do, a 1% increase can store an additional 20,000 gallons of water per acre. And this is a conservative amount. Most of the data that we use here comes from the Natural Resource Conservation Service. That's 20,000 gallons of water every time it rains, because that rain keeps moving down. And I'm telling you, some of these BMPs that we've installed and managed, they actually are amazing how fast that stormwater doesn't sit on top, it goes straight down into the soil, and that's where we're going to have our benefits. Reducing flooding, and just to kind of prove that out, I've been working on research and reading the papers from around the world since 2019 and trying to understand a little bit more how this works, because politicians and people really want data, right? Give me the facts. Just summarize what you're trying to tell me. Nobody, or many folks, would not have your patience to sit here for this. But so in parks, we're looking at We have about 15,000 acres of parkland. If we were able to increase that soil organic matter by 1%, 20,000 gallons of water per acre, you're looking at an additional 306 million gallons of water stored per acre. I mean, for the whole 15,000, but it's a lot. Reducing those peak flows that people are experiencing and being able to slow the velocities of those waters down a little bit. So, the great thing about soil organic matter, it's not like clay. You know, a clay particle can feel moist, but can a plant always get the water off of the clay particle? It's tight. It holds on to it. But soil organic matter is like your grandmother. Sure, have another cookie. No problem. Yes, drink some more milk. That's what soil organic matter. It's really loose, and it's not only its water, but its nutrients. It doesn't hang on to it with a tenacity like a clay particle or some of those other particles. And of course, sand, God bless its heart, it doesn't hang on to anything, right? So, air quality. This was the big one as we all look at trying to reduce the amount of CO2 in the atmosphere at this time. By using a healthy soil, you can actually increase the amount of CO2 that can be pulled out of the atmosphere and stored in the ground. And again, looking at the same type of formulation equations that we use for water, we're looking at being able to remove about an additional 400,000 tons of CO2 per year. So this is another significant contribution to what you're already capturing from your vegetation. And especially, and remember that that vegetation has to be healthy to actually function. So this removes approximately 97,000, or it mitigates 97,000 vehicles per year. So it's a nice little offset that you can offer. Bless you. And again, the type of organic matter does matter. So I've got a nice little stylized profile here showing the layers of the earth. And we're all familiar with the top layer, right? The little layer that's got the leaves, the sticks, the dead bugs. That material breaks down and will start moving down the profile through those little pores that you've created. If you don't have any pores, then it kind of sits on top. But it's very reactive. It's coming, it's going, it's coming and going. And a lot of the things that we're going to be talking about, what we're trying to do is to keep it there. Once you've got that litter layer, you want it to be able to break down, going down into the decomposing plant and animal material that'll last at least 2 to 50 years. And this is probably a primary goal for us at this time, is that we want to try to make an impact of what's going on for the next 50 years. And then, of course, eventually moving it on down. And I want you to know, okay, let me ask. So what are some of the ways that you can move that material down or increase your soil organic matter at lower depths? Any ideas?
With a shovel.
Yeah, I like that. That's right, you could. Anything else? What's a good way to get the organic matter down into those lower depths? Yeah, but what happens, you expose it to air when you do that, and it's the air that will break it down, water and air.
Earthworms.
Earthworms, yeah, that's a good one. But also, and this gave me a whole nother appreciation. I was complaining to my NRCS friend about the cracks in my front lawn, right? And he goes, well, Debbie, as soon as it rains, or if you ever water, all of that organic matter is going to go where? I go, wow. You can just see it. You can just see those cracks filling in with soil organic matter. And that's one of the ways you can get it down. But also, I've had friends that will go in there and fill those cracks up with compost to increase their organic matter at deeper depths. So it gives you a whole nother perspective about cracks in your soil, right? Are you excited about working with your cracks in the future? The other thing, of course, is the roots, and we'll talk a little bit about the roots and how they contribute. So what we really want to do is to move that soil organic matter, protect it long enough so that it can get off of the surface and move on down through the profile. So these healthy soils that support healthy plants and landscapes, it contains a variety of bacteria and fungi, other organisms. They're still discovering new organisms and how they work in the systems. And the great thing about all these organisms is that it helps plants to access their water and their nutrients for growth. You're turning minerals that are in a form that plants can't use very well. How about iron? What about phosphorus in your soils? Yeah, pretty tough in a calcium soil because it gets tied up instantly. And you've all seen the pH chart. I took the pH chart out, but it's a 7 pH is where most of the nutrients are available in the highest amounts. And so that's the other thing that your organic matter will do. It will slightly decrease because it's humic acids. It will reduce your pH so that there are more nutrients available through that mechanism. But also, these little organisms have the ability to utilize all these different forms and make it more available for plants. And one of my favorite organisms is mycorrhiza. How many have ever heard of mycorrhiza? All right, well, it's a special fungi. There's a lot of different species, and again, they're still discovering species of mycorrhiza. They make an association with plant roots. We used to think it was just trees, but they've done a lot more research. It's trees, shrubs, and now it's grasses and even annual crops. So the mycorrhiza has this association with the plant roots that it can end up assisting that plant to explore up to 700 times more soil volume for water and nutrients. And you can see this little diagram or illustration on the bottom right. That's what you're looking at for a mycorrhiza infested or association versus non. You have much more rapid, faster establishment of plants and much more resilient plants. And for us in San Antonio, it's the only way to get trees to survive our climate. Soil has good aggregation. And I probably aggravate people by showing them my soil samples. Yep, some girls show other things, but no, I show soil samples. Are you ready? I'm going to pass it this way. If you'll make sure this, so I'm not walking your screen. So here's some soils. Don't hesitate to open them up, and if you really want to smell them, go ahead and take a little quick whiff of those soils. Yep. So aggregation is just where the soil particles are sticking together and forming larger structures. It improves water holding capacity and drought resistance. It protects the soil from wind and water erosion. And we all know about water erosion, but sometimes we forget about wind. But until, of course, we get the big storms coming in, and you can see the sky is hazy just from dust. So keeping that in mind, that top layer of soil, when it's lost through water or wind erosion, you're losing all your good nutrients. All your soil organic matter that you were trying to hold on is gone with the wind. The aggregation is what really allows for nutrient transport, including your oxygen and other gases that are needed. It assists with carbon sequestration. So it's a part of what actually works to increase the CO2 coming out of the, being pulled out of the air and put back into the soil. And yep, you got another habitat to manage. It creates habitats for all those soil microorganisms getting inside in there. And you can see this in this illustration. This is from my front yard. So on the left, you've got the clay clods, right? Remember me jumping up and down on my sharpshooter trying to get it into the clay soil? That's what you got on the left. Does it have much organic matter? Does it have any structure? Nope, not much aggregation, not much structure. This is what we call blocky in the soil science world. And then you come over here to the right, same soil, different management. Look at that aggregation. And I want you to know that people come over to my yard to dig up some of my extra plants and they go, oh my God, they can dig it up with a hand shovel. It's a miracle. I love it. It's all the work that I put into that paid off. So, you ready for just to take a quick breather? Any questions or comments? Or do you believe it? Do you think I'm pulling your leg? All right, good stuff, isn't it?
Are you gonna tell us how you made your soil so good?
Yes, sir. I am. That's it's keeping you on the edge of your chairs, isn't it? Okay. So here's the keys and practices to soil health. Yep, they're straight off of the Natural Resource Conservation Service website. And anytime they had grazing, I just put mowing in there because it's the same type of operation. We want to maximize soil cover. We want to allow vegetation to grow taller. We want to maximize the presence of living roots in the soil. You want to minimize soil and vegetation disturbances, especially the dreaded compaction. Talk about squeezing all those beautiful pore spaces right out of a soil. And you want to maximize biodiversity of plants and organisms and utilizing modified mowing practices to accomplish the above. So it sounds pretty simple. Let's talk a little bit more specifically and jump right into some of the operations that you may be dealing with. Mowing and line trimming, and this is all built for non-irrigated areas because when you got ball fields or irrigation, it kind of eschews your use, your management goals, and how things respond. We're looking at utilizing 4 inches as the minimum height, and I know for a lot of park areas, especially in San Antonio, that had the same mowing contracts for over 20 years, and the regulation across the city had been, for urban parks, not the natural areas, but for urban parks, was 1.5 to 2 inches. So they're moving it up easily up to 3 inches across, and they'll be doing some mowing areas where hopefully at the preferred minimum height of 4 inches. And this is where, I had my little ruler, I was driving around town and I jump out and went, oh my God, look at that turf area. It's so beautiful, it's so perfect. And I jump out. I want you to know every time I jumped out and measured, it was pretty much at 4 inches. It seems to be a really nice magical number. People can walk through it still. They can see crawly things coming at them through sufficiently. So what we found also is that weed eaters, line trimmers have a little difficult time maybe trying to keep a straight height across. So we recommend that the mowers set the heights for the line trimmers while they're doing some edging operations. And of course, this is a long time, goes for trees and plants, is that you really want to try not to remove more than 30% of the new growth at one time. We're hoping, and this is tough because you've got either your guys need to stay busy or your contract mowers want a dependable contract and operations to do to reduce or stop mowing during droughts. And this is extremely difficult. And if you can't, if you can set it up at an even higher level, and I know a lot of the riding mowers are allowing you to go up to this 5 and 6 inches. And we know that also even some of the small push mowers for residential folks are going up to 3.75 or more inches. So this is good. And avoid scalping. For us, scalping has probably been one of the most detrimental habit across our parks. And that's one of the things, and my understanding from parks, is that's one of the big complaints that they get. We also want to avoid mowing when the soil is wet and saturated because
makes your blades dull.
oh, yes, I'm sure that's important. What else? I'm just listening, waiting for that dreaded word. Yeah, it's compaction. So over here on the right, this is one of my favorite illustrations because it's so straightforward. We forget. It's kind of like when you prune a tree. You forget about the tree roots, how every operation you do impacts the roots. If you keep it mowed low, your depth of rootings, your robustness, the amount of roots that you're going to have is going to be decreased. You want to keep it as high as tolerable by whatever activity is happening or how the public accepts it to a higher height so that you can have the depth and the robustness. This is the way you build a resilient turf, is to have the robustness of the root system. That's what will survive when everything else doesn't. And the amazing thing they have found out by the research on this is these higher heights actually reduce your weedy components. Because what happens when there's any bare soil in an area? Oh yeah, it's a seed bed, isn't it? Yep, you've got everything coming in there from your perennial Caribbean mallow to your ruellia, wild petunias, all the stuff that it's really tough to maintain in a turf area, especially to make it look uniform because everybody wants to live in that uniform area. So there's some other issues that you may see. This is actually a 4-inch turf area that I measured it, I photographed it, I went, yeah, look at that. When it's one species, it's easier to maintain. And this is our typical urban park of in the past year with the droughts because they've been mowed too low, over mowed when there wasn't any new growth at all. But they're out there mowing because they've got a contract with the specifications. So when the turf is allowed to grow, this is the other issue. When you get those vigorous roots, what happens to the top portion? Yep, it's going to grow faster and more often, right? So there may need to be some adjustments there. And what we feel like is that your strict mowing schedules may not work as well. You may have to adjust them or be more flexible in your operations. And the other thing is public acceptance. But we think pretty much that this illustration on the left would be publicly accepted by anybody. So how does this strategy create healthy soils? And here we're talking about building your root systems by allowing the vegetation to grow. And we know that plants depend on the roots to survive, especially in the dry weather. And yes, have you ever seen a root system like that?
Not around here.
Not around here, absolutely not. So I throw that in because it's really cool. That's a little blue stem.
Wow.
Exactly. That's the potential of a little blue stem. Well, you don't see that except for like Kansas, Missouri, whatever. But anyway, that's the potential of, and that's why native plants are promoted, and grasses included, as being so drought tolerant. Therefore, the more robust the root system, the more drought tolerant the plant. Taller plants with their more robust root systems are a constant source of soil organic matter, which continually feeds the soil microbes. And that's what you require to assist in making that aggregation and creating that pore space. And that taller vegetation will also be able to slow the stormwater better, getting it to be able to soak into the ground, remove pollution from the air and the water, and prevent soil erosion and weeds. It also assists in creating those resilient landscapes that you'll eventually need to maintain less. Line trimming. So it's often the only way to manage what we, difficult areas, slopes. And we're making the recommendation to try to keep those slopes. It's not really where you want the public to walk anyway, at a minimum of 5 to 6 inches, which will make it much easier to prevent scalping. They can be used quickly to remove the tops in any type of situation, whether your soils are saturated or you've got a drought going on. You can take the line trimmers out there to do the operation. Oops. The other thing about line trimming, how many have had issues or seen the death by line trimmer disease? A few, huh? I wish I had a nickel. I'd be a rich person. So this is really challenging, teaching and helping staff to understand, and keeping that head of that line trimmer sloped down away from the trunk of the tree will assist, but I'm really into physical barriers. I've actually operated some heavy equipment, and you really need to have big, loud signals for being able to know where to go or what not to do. And so tree guards are an excellent way if you don't have gator bags on your trees already, and you want those on there for at least 3 to 4 years while that bark tightens up. Unless, of course, it's a crepe myrtle or a Texas persimmon, because they have really thin bark and that may be requiring additional time. But the one thing pointing out, you see the plumbing? That's what we call it. The plumbing in the tree, the blue going up from the ground with the water to the tree canopy. And on the other side, we got the plumbing going down from the canopy, taking the carbohydrates, feeding the roots and all those soil microorganisms and the mycorrhiza attached. And so that plumbing, you got your outer bark, but slapped right up against that outer bark and here to the outer bark is the plumbing. There is no way a guy could actually nick the outer bark without damaging the plumbing. And once you damage the plumbing, there's no water going up or food going down. And so our recommendation, if you lose more than 30% of that outer bark around a tree, you might as well replace it. It will probably never recover. You couldn't grow fast enough to make it happen. Mulching. Mulching is one of my favorite things, and organic mulches, when anybody asks me, I said, well, organic mulches actually will break down and provide that additional soil organic matter. So using it around young trees has been, that's a no-brainer. Lots of folks can do that or do that already, but think about actually putting some mulch around your larger trees too. They will benefit from the additional material, especially to feed your soil microbes that are providing the extensive mycorrhiza root system. So, how many have volcano mulching in their areas? Yeah, it's amazing. I can't figure out where it comes from. I think it's from corn, where you just pile the soil up and the corn plant produces new roots. So what are the detriments for volcano mulching? Getting mulch right up against the trunk of the tree.
You can't breathe.
It rots the trunk.
Yeah, I actually accidentally did that to a Texas persimmon tree. I love that tree. Oh my God, I grew it from a little guy. And I didn't see it because I had inland sea oats all around the bottom, is that the mulch was building up all by itself up against the trunk of the tree. That tree died. It rotted the outer bark. And the other thing, and we have this happen especially a lot in park areas on non-irrigated areas, is that, well, it's a little bit more moist underneath the volcano mulch. So let's all the roots grow right there. In fact, let's just grow around the tree. That's all we really need. And then those tree roots that are growing around the tree get bigger and bigger and bigger. And what happens? They can actually strangle a tree. So they'll squeeze off. Remember that plumbing? They'll actually squeeze that plumbing off. And then we've got a couple of little rules here about not using fresh sawdust, and including the no mulching up against your tree trunks. Soil amendments. And most of my amendments, I do some composting, but most of my amendments have just been leaves and mulch, leaves and mulch. And that's the way I get that friable soil. So, you ready for your second? And I want you to know that these are a little bit older, so you don't have to be afraid if you want to smell them. Because let me tell you, one of those was pretty potent the first time we did our class last September. So no matter what kind of soil amendment you're using, whether it's manure-based or we're lucky in San Antonio, we have a green bin program where the material's put into a specialized bin, whether it's tree branches or grass clippings, leaves, and even kitchen waste. It all makes a pretty nice compost. Soil amendments can be applied any time of the year. They're weed-free, well-aged, and you really want to make sure you don't have a lot of nitrogen in it. So make sure you have a dependable source, especially over the recharge, because what happens with that nitrogen? I mean, soil organic matter is pretty good about hanging on to it, but still, if you got more than 3%, nobody can use that immediately. So what happens to the nitrogen in your amendment and a nice little storm comes through? That goes straight into your aquifer. Maintenance and low impact maintenance areas. This is the term that our parks folks created. There are great ways for addressing urban challenges, from reducing emissions, reducing labor costs, building up soil organic matter quickly, slowing stormwater, promoting infiltration, removing pollutants, sequester and store more CO2, and increasing biodiversity. And the slide up here on the top, that's from the Houston Medical Center. That was one of the first pocket prairies that was noted, and that it is a high maintenance area, right? And then the one down below is a pocket prairie site over at, or it's a prairie site over at Lady Bird Johnson Wildflower Center, so a lot less. So looking at where you're going to have your pocket prairie, it can provide a lot of benefits, and that would depend on how much maintenance is going to be required. And so this may be a little bit more difficult if you want to keep it a prairie and not allow the trees, the woodies to come in. We've got some tools shown here. There's Nathan using a plier. That's my nephew's favorite method, is getting out those seedlings while they're still young. But the tool on the right, that's my favorite. Oh my gosh, that's my pull bear, a weed wrench. And then I can just pull out a 1.5 inch hackberry. And you know, how many people have tried to kill a hackberry by cutting off its top? Has that ever worked? Has anybody ever been successful that way? No. So there are lots of different reasons of why you might want to be mowing. It includes assisting in managing brush and weeds and for public acceptance. And there's quite a bit of literature out there trying to determine what is better. But if you are going to be mowing, we want to look at trying to reduce that mowing and then avoid disrupting feeding, mating, and ground nesting sites for birds such as some of my favorites, killdeers, whippoorwills, ducks, etc. All of these are ground nesters. And how many of you have seen a long-billed thrasher going through the brush, just throwing that material up in the air? So there's a lot of activities that happen in these low mow or no mow areas. More mowing can lead to being dominated by grasses. And what we found is that you lose sometimes bluebonnets. People always want bluebonnets, right? You probably are highly pressured for bluebonnets. But once you start building up your soil, guess what goes away? Bluebonnets. Aren't we glad that cows don't really like bluebonnets? We wouldn't have a state flower, would we? So what we've recommended is that in your pocket prairies or low mow areas to have some extra mowing in patches so that you can keep some of those annual wildflowers that are so iconic. And then otherwise, if mowing is needed, avoid between February to early July. That's when the birds are nesting on the ground. It'll also assist with migration in the spring. Maintain a height of 5 to 6 inches and avoid mowing when it's wet or saturated, because it's going to mess up your blades. And so, why do we want to mow at those higher heights? We want to mow because for so many of our native grasses, and maybe not so native. I wish that we could kill KR bluestem, but anyway, your growing point is way up there above ground. It's at least 3 to 4 inches, and you want to protect and give it a little bit of leeway there. The exceptions, of course, is buffalo grass and vine mesquite, which are in a lot of the habiturf type mixes. Maintenance along rivers, creeks, and lakes. This is the land that has so much potential for assisting in increasing soil organic matter and stormwater storage, and also carbon sequestration, 3 to 7 times more capability of sequestering carbon out of the air. So the maintenance of these zones actually directly impact some of the benefits that we're hoping to receive from the riparian zones. It's crucial to leave a buffer, and we all know why, because have you not seen mowing up to the edge, because people want access to that edge, they want to see the water, but we want to make sure we have at least 10 to 15 feet. And of course, a few trees will help stabilize that bank. In words of the NRCS, the grasses are the cement and the tree roots are the rebar for holding that bank into place. Vegetative buffers also filter out pollutants and create habitat, and the maintenance of these areas would follow just what we talked about in the pocket prairies, except for keeping your mowers out of that. And there's nothing worse than having anyway, we'll talk a little bit about the equipment in a minute, but uncontrolled access, especially to the parks that people love to be in that have water, so that makes them more of a magnet. How do we kind of reduce total access to the edge of the bank? And making sure that we don't degrade the quality of the water. I mean, this is one of our lakes that constantly has to be dredged out because it's been filled with sediment. And that could have been avoided by a few different practices, including not mowing to the edge anymore, establishing physical barriers or natural barriers with vegetation. And one of my favorite things is to actually have some living banks where you have a lot of activities going on that can be an outdoor laboratory that will improve water quality and habitat. Trees, okay. Trees do have a role in this. And again, they are an important tool to manage. They do not provide the benefits we're hoping for without good health, which depend on the health of the soil. But trees also contribute to the health of the soil by some of the reasons that we've talked about between the leaves and the roots. Basic pruning, making sure that we don't leave any stubs. Do we have any stub leavers in the house? Oh, good, thank gosh. And oak wilt, it's a huge problem for you guys, I know, and making sure that we paint those ones. I saw that in your ordinance. It's recommended, but not actually a violation. So making sure that you're role modeling, there you go. Avoid removing more than 25% of the foliage at the time. And again, doing proper 3 cuts on those large branches so you don't rip the bark down the tree. Have you ever done that? Oh. So here's some abused trees. This is where it's been line-tailed and they forgot about the roots. And so that tree will work doubly hard trying to replace all those little stems that got removed along the branch. And it always amazed me. I mean, I'm not a physics. I did not take physics at all. But when you put all the weight at the end of the branch, right? What is, especially in a big windstorm, it's amazing. And then, of course, topping. We have a lot of topping going on pecan trees in San Antonio, but the tree will never be able to heal those wounds. And the branches that grow are weakly attached and definitely a hazard to park under. Can this tree be saved? I think it can. Think about it. Just think about all the things that we talked about, what we could do. Yeah, I think you could save that tree. I'm sure you're familiar with your equipment maintenance and how that will help to maintain healthy plants. And then a little bit about the equipment and trying to avoid rutting or scalping. So, do you want your largest guy on your riding mower on a wet soil? That's going to be where the blades are. No, you want to pick the lightest person you've got. When we do this talk in San Antonio, we have an equipment vendor who actually brings his equipment and shows some of the remote activity and the amazing new options that you have out there. It's pretty, I like equipment. So we think that here's some rules about trying not to compact and trying to avoid scalping. And we think that with these higher heights that scalping will be less of an issue. And again, if you're mowing in that riparian area, because sometimes a buffer does need to be knocked down for some reason or another, you definitely want to make sure to avoid rolling your equipment into, it doesn't look good on the safety records. So there's here's your remote operating equipment, and then your equipment that has the different types of booms to make that accomplished. I'm trying to cut those higher heights, mowing every 2 to 3 years to promote the diversity of plant material, leaving some patches that are mowed more regularly, and thinking about a sickle bar type mower has a tendency to bury some of your seedlings, so if it's up high, you may want to go to a rotary motor mower.
So we spent all our morning kind of talking about the importance of our healthy soils, the benefits they bring, what maintenance practices and strategies we can use to implement to kind of protect those. So I'm going to take it one step further in how we can take advantage of those, especially when we're looking at our stormwater, runoff, things of that sort. So this idea of stormwater features could be a great benefit to take advantage of those healthy landscapes and our healthy soils to help really improve the water quality, detoxify any take in the nutrients, and push out high quality water across our landscapes. So with the idea of these stormwater features, they can either be engineered or designed to meet federal, state, or even municipal pollution reduction requirements, such as like low impact development strategies. So think of like rainwater harvesting, impervious pavement, soil amendments, things of that sorts. In San Antonio, we're going to touch on it later, we have this water quality basin requirement across our Edwards Aquifer Recharge Zone that I will tackle more in detail, but those are requirements by law. Other stormwater features and strategies can also be used to not only reduce pollution, but also reduce stormwater runoff and promote that infiltration that we want across our lands. But a key idea and focus of our stormwater features in order for them to be utilized appropriately is maintenance. So as I mentioned, these stormwater features are used to reduce runoff, filter out pollutions. They could be something as simple as these curb cutouts at the top right photo that you see in parking lots that have an easy access to our green spaces, or they could be something more complex like the bottom right photo. That bottom right photo is a tiered approach where it takes in the water and it kind of does a slow cascading waterfall effect before it feeds into a stream site in San Antonio. But in both photos, you notice that the water's not really entering. The water's kind of pooling at these sites. 9 times out of 10, the key maintenance issue is sediment accumulation at these sites that's preventing the water from entering these green spaces to help treat that water. So without maintenance, these features will not be able to serve their purpose and eventually create a nuisance, such as standing water, public health concerns, things of that sorts. So touching up upon this requirement in San Antonio is this idea of water quality basins. They are detention basins or retention basins that are engineered features that are required by law to mitigate water pollution from stormwater developed before it leaves a development site. So across different commercial properties, things of that sort. We have these basins, you may see them, they're kind of fenced off usually, and their feature is to take in the stormwater runoff, leaving a impervious site and filter it out before pushing it back into the environment. These rules are in place in San Antonio to protect the Edwards Aquifer drinking water supply, because in San Antonio we still rely about 50% of our water supply is from the Edwards Aquifer, and it applies to this recharge zone. At this recharge zone in San Antonio, it's an opportunity where it has direct conduits and direct pathways for the water to easily enter. So this is why those regulations are really in place to protect that particular zone in San Antonio. Again, just really emphasizing the idea of maintenance. We like to say that we should have two types of maintenance: routine maintenance, which is based on like a monthly basis, and especially stormwater, storm event maintenance, which should be after a 48-hour rainfall, after 48 hours after a rainfall period. And there should be no sort of standing water available within these systems after a 48-hour period. So on the right-hand side, we were able to actually push that storm event maintenance, and we were able to go out to several different sediment basins across San Antonio after a 48-hour period. So the photo on the right, it's a sand filtration system. It's properly maintained. There's no standing water. There's no excessive tree growth or seedlings or debris present. So we can flag this as a properly functioning system. However, the photo to the right, we see a very obvious presence of standing water in this particular sediment basin. So that's indicating right then and there that something's not working appropriately in this system. And truthfully, when Debbie and I have been looking out, different project sites, different stormwater features, 9 times out of 10, the issue is sediment accumulation. So when you're doing your routine maintenance or storm event maintenance, you want to make sure that the storm water runoff has a direct pathway to flow into your bases or your features, and it's not flowing around it or bypassing it, thereby negating any sort of treatment. You want to remove any sort of accumulated sediment, unwanted vegetation, and debris such as like litter, dead plant material, etc. And you want to make sure it's properly maintained your vegetation, cutting it to the standards, and just really emphasizing the point that if there's standing water present in this type of system after a 48-hour period, then something is drastically occurring wrong. And usually it is something with the sediment occurring to easily fix this type of structure. So I want to kind of talk more about the idea of utilizing stormwater features and how we can bring just an added benefit when we're wanting to help utilize our soils and our lands. So we're still trying to trademark this phrase, let's say that, but this is the key idea that we're trying to use when we're implementing a stormwater feature. It's the 3 S's. So you want to slow it, spread it, and sink it. Then I'm going to be a kindergarten teacher, so repeat it after me. Slow, spread, sink it. Oh, we can do better. One more time. Thank you. I appreciate that. So when we add a BMP to increase the benefit, as Debbie mentioned earlier, all our properties have a slope where the stormwater flows to its lowest point. We can easily take advantage of it by allowing the vegetation at this lowest point to grow taller, as we'll slow down the water to help spread it, and sink it across our properties. We can also take it one step further and implement a stormwater BMP to increase the overall benefits. Debbie and I, when we were doing this presentation, we wanted to kind of highlight this idea of further take the ideas of why erosion and sediment is such a key issue with our stormwater BMPs and what benefits the stormwater BMPs can help to combat sediment and erosion impacts. So basic definition is erosion where the process where soil is transported from one location to another. It can be done by water, it can be done by wind. And why it's so critical to emphasize this is because a lot of the erosion occurs in those top 0 to 6 inches of our soils. And as we know, those 0 to 6 inches of our soil is where all that healthy organic matter that we want to help prevent, to capture that stormwater runoff on our properties, to help incentivize plant growth, it's all in that 0 to 6 inches. So that topsoil will remove necessary nutrients, that's soil organic matter that supports plant growth, impact soil moisture rates, impact soil retention rates as well, disrupt infiltration, and impact vegetation growth by also increasing flooding risk. So it's really important that we are on top of our impacts of erosion. And when soil is transported, it becomes this pollutant, which is called sediment. So increased erosion leads to increased sedimentation. So, but again, what's the whole problem? What's the big problem with sediment? Sediment are these tiny little particles, but they can have such big consequences and big problems. The two photos on the right just kind of emphasizing the discoloration of stormwater runoff as it's moving across our lands into the lowest points on our property, and that discoloration is just an accumulation of everything that it picks up, including sediment. So some effects of sediment pollution can include the reducing capacity of those drainage systems. As we mentioned, sediment will accumulate at the entrance of stormwater features, prevented from any sort of water moving into those systems and bypassing any sort of treatment. It can increase turbidity, making it harder for fish to breathe, reducing biodiversity, have habitat destruction capabilities, and can also lead to some sort of algal blooms, that eutrophication process from that increased nutrient transportation from sedimentation. So, enough about talking about sediment and talking about erosion impacts. Let's kind of talk about some sort of basic stormwater BMP features. So in your book, I'm going to be touching up a lot on that Hillside Sewership Guidebook that's going to emphasize some of these stormwater features. A lot of them are pretty simple. It can have some sort of strategies that you already have on your properties, or materials found on your properties, and that could be first we're going to touch upon our wooding materials, such as our limbs. So these simple non-injury strategies can help really reduce erosion, reduce runoff, and really capture that stormwater to slow, spread, and sink in on our properties. So the first method I want to talk about is utilizing logs. You can do a pinpoint approach where you have like a bare ground on your property and you want to give something for that water to stick to. And the first method is called a lop and scatter method, where you're just taking woody debris and materials and putting around your bare ground area to kind of provide some sort of catchment area for that water to catch on. You can also utilize mulching upon those bare ground areas. Again, with mulching, just be careful and utilize appropriate amounts to not promote any sort of runoff from that mulching. These two photos right here are kind of more of the photos we want to highlight. The first method on the left is using a series of rows of logs. So the rows of logs will be along your slope, be along the contours of your land, and you'll just be a series of logs as the water is moving across your land. It's going to hit these logs and then slow it and spread it across the series of logs and allow it to sink into your area. If it's a high runoff event, it'll just roll over, but then if you have a series along your contours to help incentivize the slow spreading and sinking of that stormwater on your property. Emphasizing the contours of your maps. If you're having difficulty, you can't do it in-house. We have been told by our NRCS offices that they can also help you with developing those contours on your properties especially. This other idea is this log cage method, utilizing those logs and trees and debris to help really protect those already established trees, brushes on your property, because they can naturally help occur other native vegetation that can help with the stormwater mitigation and promote healthy vegetation, but they also face competition with herbivores. So having this sort of log cage method prevents that competition, but also incentivizes that natural occurrence to bring in that healthy vegetation on site. Another idea is utilizing berms and swales. I kind of like to say this is kind of more, they feed off each other, kind of like a yin-yang approach. The berms are kind of these raised, sloped areas, while the swales are kind of those trenches, you could say, that they kind of do a ripple up and down motion as the water moves across the property. And you could take it also one step further and have native plantings occurring throughout your swales and your berms to help kind of incentivize this kind of with these native vegetations. They have a very deep root system if they're left undisturbed, and they can kind of prevent like this, they can promote this netting, I would say, to kind of incentivize to stabilize these berms and swales, to really promote that capturing, the sinking, and the distribution across your properties. More about the ideas of these BMPs across our slopes, and emphasizing those berms and swales. You want to create a berm across the contours of the slope. Again, you can get in contact with your local USDA NRCS to kind of get these established. These berms can be made of temporary materials such as brushes or mulch, or like that top right photo, or even with something more permanent such as rocks. To increase the effectiveness, you can add a swale or a trench, kind of that depression. So as the water moves off, it has to go up and down across your property. You can fill the trenches with a permeable substrate, or even combine with those native plantings to increase the overall effectiveness. So, but if you are using a berms or swales method on your property, there's 3 things you want to take into consideration. You want to take into consideration the steepness of your property, the slopes, the total amount of runoff and rainfall across your property, and the spacing across it. I guess the science tells us with berms and swales, the more runoff you have on your property, the closer together these swales and berms are going to be together to kind of help promote overall effectiveness. So let's move away from utilizing our lands or utilizing our brushes. Let's talk about rocks. So this idea is also these simple non-engineered structures. The first idea is utilizing a row of rocks. So very similar to what we talked about with the rows of logs across our properties. It's the same exact concept, having a series of rows of logs along the contours of your map on your slope property. And as the stormwater moves, it's going to hit those rocks to prevent, to incentivize that slowing down of the runoff, to spread it across and to sink it. You can also, what's also beneficial is that it will also promote capturing that sediment that can provide a seed bed for new vegetation on our properties as well, to kind of really promote native vegetation growth, to really establish these rows of rocks, to really promote better capture of our stormwater across our properties. This other idea is called a media luna. People say it's like a crescent moon. I like to say it's kind of a smiley face because we want to capture that rainfall event. Utilizing these media lunas, you want to kind of pinpoint where exactly the movement of water is occurring on your property and capturing that central point right in the middle of your media luna. So when the water is moving across your property, it's going to hit that middle part of the media luna and eventually spread it across to the very edges of its tips to allow slow and spreading this concentrated water flow across your slope. The 2 important things with utilizing media lunas is, again, pinpointing the center of that media luna where the water is moving, and the tips of your media luna need to be at equal elevation. So a little bit more engineering, but also a great approach to kind of capture and slow and spread and sinking that water. A more intricate strategy, and this is kind of more where we see across our streams or our tributaries that are very severely degraded, where we have a lot of head cutting or erosion occurring, is this idea of utilizing a Zuni bowl. The Zuni bowl approach really captures a degraded system. It's usually found around these epithermal streams where there's a lot of moving water occurring after a precipitation event. It's a short period amount of time, but the force of moving water is severely down cutting and further eroding and just severely taking away that vegetation and incentivizing more sedimentation along this process. So utilizing a Zuni bowl, we want to create this cascading approach to slow the water down across it. So I'm going to kind of walk this through. It's a little bit complicated, but the first point is this head cut pour over, where the elevation is supposed to be at your head cut. So, for an example, if the head cut you're observing is 3 feet, the head cut pour over will be at 3 feet. And then the idea of it is to create this kind of lopsided bowl to capture the water into this plunge pool where as the water flows into it, it slows it down, and it eventually, once it reaches the appropriate height at the lower pour over, it'll spill over. So the lower pour over will be at half the height of this head cut pour out. So as we talked about, it's 3 feet. So the lower pour out will be at 1.5 feet. And the total size of the bowl is about 2 to 3 times of the head cut. So in this case, it'll be anywhere between 6 feet and 9 feet. So you can see you have a pretty established lopsided bowl, but as the water is captured and slowly but surely fills up, it will slow the water moving and just slowly cascade it down the property itself. You can also have this series of one rock dams across these type of streams. Think about those rows of rocks that we just talked about, but they're a lot closer together to one another, and it just further provides an opportunity to slow it down, to spread it and sink it across this area. And the idea with these Zuni bowls is that eventually it'll give this degraded channel a chance to reestablish itself to a healthy, functional area. So also with Zuni bowls, we see these a lot at our bridges or culverts where it's pumping out the stormwater across it, and it's a perfect opportunity to take this degraded channel or this degraded stream system to get it reestablished to not just be an avenue or an alley to push out stormwater. We can be able to utilize it on site. So this photo in the middle, I like to kind of highlight what we just talked about. As we see, it flows over to the overpour out area, eventually goes into this plunge pool where it slowly but surely fills up. And once it reaches that lower pour over height, it will spill over and slowly be pushed out across the system. We may have a key backup with this is if we're having a very high flow event and the water is just spilling out, this splash apron and these one rock dams can be helping benefit if water just is bypassing that plunge pool. The splash apron and one rock dam will also act in part to help slowing down and spreading and sinking across the channels.
Did that actually originate with the Zunis a long time ago?
Good question. I believe so, but a lot of the times I know the San Antonio River Authority has been implementing this, especially in their low impact development manuals. So it's becoming more and more a popular idea, but thank you for that. I appreciate it. Another idea for a stormwater feature could be this enhanced bioswale. As we mentioned and we talked about earlier, these swales are kind of those ditches that we find on site where it's just kind of it's like a depression where it's supposed to be taking in water and slowing, spreading, and sinking it. But with a bioswale, it's kind of has this engineered media where it has an underlying pipe and also has some sort of substrate to help with infiltration. It's very much like a rain garden, but it's used on much of a larger scale and can be found along more like streets, parking lots, to kind of those bigger impervious surfaces to kind of help take in the large amount of runoff occurring across these properties. For this case study and example, we were able to find an enhanced bioswale along the Blanco River and utilizing the existing riparian vegetation. For the riparian area, I like to say it's kind of this transition zone between a waterway and your lands that have a really unique and differentiated type of fauna and vegetation that really help and aid with taking in excess water with nutrients. It's this very special type of system. So utilizing this native vegetation and putting in this bioswale, they both work hand in hand to enhance and provide effectiveness to protect these riverbanks from further degradation and creating shade and habitat. So the bioswale and working together with riparian vegetation took this once degraded stream bank site on the Blanco River, and then a year later we got this very healthy and functional site that will reduce erosion, take in pollution that otherwise would negatively impact the Blanco River. Another idea I like to talk about is more of an advanced idea is this constructed or enhanced wetlands that can be used as a stormwater best management practice. We see these a lot. I see these a lot with my wastewater project efforts to help clean up the treated effluent. But this is a great idea because with wetlands, they have a very unique type of structure with their vegetation, with their soils, and their microbial assemblages. And those three work together with an enhanced wetland to take in stormwater, to filter out sediment, to filter out those nutrients, detoxify chemicals. They can also be used as flood prevention. They can create habitats, and a lot of the times they can be located along a natural stream course. So when the water gets put into this wetland, it can naturally treat it before it pushes it out into a natural waterway. And then with that, I kind of flew by this. I apologize for that. But other roles and opportunities we kind of want to highlight. We usually have like a list of different, like City of San Antonio, we really emphasize the rules, especially with our MS4 permitting, that we have a big issue in San Antonio where landscapers or private landowners, when they are doing their lawn work, cleaning, things of that sort, they will just take their clippings or their leaves and blow it into the streets. That is a violation of our MS4 permitting, and we really try to encourage discharge of clean, clear water onto the ground or into a storm drain, because that's the only type of water or stormwater supposed to be flowing into it. Debbie and I also found a great opportunity with UGRA locally with this Water Resource Preservation Grant Program, where they provide cost sharing for construction, designing of these stormwater features. So it's cost sharing to help you develop these ideas and these structures if you are interested in doing anything of that sort.